Have you ever experienced a night when the atmosphere feels dense, as if it's brimming with untold stories just waiting to be revealed? It all began in a house that has been my sanctuary for 2 decades, enveloped in the serene stillness that only the late hours can offer. I'm Ellen, 46, married to Mark, a man who thrives on his routines just as I revel in the delightful unpredictability of a good storm. Life unfolds with a rhythm: dinner at 6, his snores by 10, and me, wide awake, gazing at the ceiling, pondering when I ceased to embody the woman I once was. Yet, on that particular night, a change occurred. An unexpected turn of events, beginning with a bottle of wine and culminating in a secret I can never undo. It was a Friday, one of those uncommon evenings when Mark welcomed his old college friend, David, to his home. David is 48, single, possessing a laugh that resonates throughout the space and eyes that hold your gaze just a moment longer than expected. He's been a constant presence for years: barbecues, game nights, always lingering nearby, familiar yet never crossing that invisible boundary. That evening, however, the atmosphere felt distinct. Mark was in high spirits, pouring whiskey and sharing tales, while I savored red wine in the kitchen, my sundress swaying gently as I navigated between the counter and the table. It was an ordinary dress, light blue soft cotton, but it embraced me in a way that made me feel seen. The evening progressed, and Mark, as expected, began to lose his vigor after his third drink. By midnight, he lay across the couch, his snores resonating powerfully, overpowering the music in the background. David and I shared a glance, one that conveyed, "Here we go again," and we chuckled, the sound piercing the fog of the evening. I really ought to have wrapped things up, sent David on his way, but I chose not to. His gaze held a certain intensity, the way his eyes traced the outline of the dress hugging my hips, compelling me to linger in that moment just a bit more. We transitioned to the kitchen, the bottle of wine nestled between us, our conversation flowing effortlessly yet brimming with tension, reminiscent of the electric air before a tempest. David leaned against the counter, his shirt casually unbuttoned to reveal a glimpse of his chest, and I couldn't help but observe details I had overlooked previously: the fluidity of his hands as he spoke, the deepening of his voice when he uttered my name. I filled another glass, my fingers grazing his as I passed it to him, and that brief contact hung in the air, a silent electricity that we both sensed but chose not to recognize. The house lay in stillness, punctuated only by Mark's snores, a subtle reminder of the boundary we were skirting. Yet this only heightened the sense of vitality in the moment, infusing it with an exhilarating danger. We engaged in a conversation devoid of substance, reminiscing about the past, critiquing mediocre films, indulging in that delightful exchange of trivialities that resembles a graceful waltz. Yet each word carried an undertone, a hidden meaning that lingered in the air. I leaned in, the fabric of my dress gently sliding down one shoulder, and I chose not to adjust it. David's gaze tracked the motion, and I noticed it: the change, the desire, the instant he ceased to feign disinterest. He placed his glass on the table, his fingers brushing against mine once more, and this time, he lingered. The atmosphere was dense, charged with potential, and I sensed my heart racing, my skin alive with a desire I hadn't experienced in ages. It was incorrect. I was aware it was not right. Mark lay there, peacefully asleep, yet still my partner, the one with whom I had crafted a shared existence. David was a close companion, a familiar presence in our home, having celebrated our anniversaries and lent a hand during our furniture rearrangements countless times. Yet in that kitchen, as the wine coursed through me and the night enveloped us, none of it felt significant. David moved in, his hand hovering over the counter beside mine, just close enough for me to sense his warmth. He remarked on the dress, noting how it seemed tailored for me, his voice low and gravelly, as if he were revealing a secret he ought not to share. I could have brushed it aside, taken a step back, and concluded it right then and there. However, I chose not to. I gazed at him, truly gazed at him, allowing the moment to linger. His hand glided over my arm, igniting a spark like a match being struck. My breath hitched, and I remained still. His fingers glided along the curve of my shoulder, slipping beneath the strap of my dress, and a shiver coursed through me, a blend of trepidation and thrill. I surrendered to his touch, just enough to signal my willingness, and his gaze deepened, his breath catching as if he were as taken aback as I was. The events that followed unfolded in a haze of warmth and darkness. His hand moved to my waist, drawing me nearer, and I found no reason to pull away. My hands rested against his chest, sensing the rhythmic beat of his heart, and for a fleeting moment, we remained there, enveloped in a realm where nothing else mattered. The moment lingered, suspended in time, filled with an unspoken longing that crackled in the atmosphere, a tension that was both destined and unattainable. Mark's snores resonated softly in the background, A subtle reminder of the danger that lay ahead, yet it only quickened my heartbeat. David whispered my name, gentle yet insistent, and I sensed myself coming undone, poised to step over a boundary I couldn't return from. A sudden creak from the living room jolted me back to reality. Mark stirred on the couch, murmuring softly in his slumber, and the enchantment shattered. I withdrew, my cheeks aflame, my heart racing as if I had just sprinted a mile. David took a step back, his hands falling to his sides, his face reflecting a blend of desire and remorse. Silence enveloped us. The wine glass remained still, the kitchen now overly illuminated, almost surreal. He mentioned that he ought to leave, his tone strained, and I acquiesced, unable to look him in the eye. Yet, just before his departure, he turned his gaze toward me, truly seeing me, and remarked, "You possess more than you allow yourself to reveal, Ellen." The door shut behind me, leaving me in solitude, the silence overwhelming. I collapsed into a chair, my hands quivering, the fabric of the dress feeling like a treachery against my skin. What have I just accomplished? What have we just accomplished? It wasn't merely a brush, a fleeting instant, it was a hidden truth, conceived in the glow of one night, and it weighed more than I could endure. Mark lay in deep slumber, unaware, while I sensed that the truth was etched upon my very being. What if he had awakened? What if David expressed an opinion? What if I couldn't erase the memory of his touch, the longing that lingered within me? I felt an overwhelming urge to weep, to shout, to tear the dress away and erase the entire experience from my memory. Yet, beneath the surface, in a corner I hesitated to acknowledge, I understood that forgetting was not an option I desired. I yearned to ignite that flame once more, even if it required reducing everything to ashes. The following morning I awoke with a burden in my chest, as if I had consumed the secret entirely and it lingered there, dense and unrelenting. The house lay in stillness, Mark having departed for an early round of golf, the lingering scent of his cologne mingling with a note detailing the evening's dinner arrangements. I found myself in the kitchen, gazing at the counter that bore the imprint of David's hands, the place where I had allowed my emotions to spill over. Though my sundress was in the laundry, its memory lingered, the way it had gracefully slipped from my shoulder, the way his gaze had trailed after me. I repeatedly reassured myself that it was an error, a momentary slip driven by the effects of wine and a sense of solitude. Yet, the reality was I found it impossible to shake it from my mind. Concerning him, I navigated my day as if I were on autopilot. Delivered the dry cleaning, responded to messages, and exchanged a smile with the neighbor who greeted me from her porch. Yet my thoughts wandered, reliving each moment of that evening, David's touch on my arm, the way his voice enveloped my name like a secret revelation. I found myself anticipating the weight of shame to engulf me, to serve as a reminder of my vows, of Mark's goodness, and of David's friendship with him. Yet there was this allure. A restless heat compelled me to check my phone repeatedly, yearning for a message I knew I shouldn't desire. By noon, I found myself in complete disarray. I stood in the shower, allowing the water to sear my skin, attempting to cleanse myself of the memory of his touch. However, it was unsuccessful. If anything, it intensified the feeling, as if the steam was pulling him from within me, clear and inescapable. As my phone vibrated on the counter, a surge of excitement coursed through me. It was indeed David. Just a straightforward message, "Are you all right?" Just 2 words, yet they ignited within me like a flame in parched earth. I gazed at the screen, my fingers poised, aware that I ought to dismiss it, erase it, cut him off. However, I chose not to. I replied, "Yeah." "And you?" and pressed send before I could hold back. His response was swift, "Can we talk?" I ought to have declined. I ought to have switched off my phone and returned to my reality. However, I invited him to come over instead. As I typed, the words seemed to stab at my conscience, yet they were the only truth I could grasp. I spent the next hour walking back and forth, changing my shirt 3 times, finally choosing a loose blouse that felt comfortable, nothing like that dress. As the doorbell chimed, a knot formed in my stomach, yet my feet acted of their own accord, swinging the door open to reveal David. His jaw was set, and his gaze locked onto mine, as if he were seeking some unspoken approval. I welcomed him inside, the space seeming to shrink around us, as if the walls were inching closer. In the living room we lingered, the couch where Mark had once found rest mere feet from us, a quiet observer of the journey we had embarked upon. I inquired about his presence, my tone more cutting than intended, yet he remained unfazed. He mentioned that he couldn't shake off thoughts of last night, of me, and of what nearly transpired. His voice was deep and gritty, as if he were ripping the words from his very core. I felt compelled to urge him to go, to declare it had been an error, Yet the atmosphere was dense once more, laden with that familiar charged tension. He moved in and I stood my ground. Our conversation was brief. Words seemed inadequate, as if they couldn't capture the essence of what was unfolding between us. As his hand grasped mine, his fingers intertwined with a gentle ease, the very fabric of reality seemed to shift. I sensed my determination weakening, the essence of who I was as Ellen the wife, Ellen the virtuous, dissipating beneath the pressure of his caress. He drew me nearer, his other hand gently placed on my waist, and I surrendered to the moment. My breath caught as his lips grazed my temple, gentle yet purposeful, a question I responded to by tilting my head, allowing him to discover the curve of my neck. Each action unfolded with a measured pace, every gesture a decision we were bound to live with. This time it was more than a mere brush, a fleeting instant. His hands glided beneath my blouse, discovering skin that ignited beneath his caress, and I leaned into him, my fingers sinking into his shoulders. The living room swirled around me, the couch and coffee table dissolving into the periphery. There was no wine to point fingers at, no fog of the night, just the two of us, unfiltered and daring, stepping over a boundary we had only teased in the past. His breath brushed against my ear, softly uttering my name as if it were a plea, and I responded with a sound unfamiliar to me, one filled with desperation and longing. It was misguided, undeniably misguided, yet it seemed to be the sole reality I had encountered in ages. Initially, the sound of the car went unnoticed. The crunch of tires on gravel faded away, overshadowed by our breaths and the pounding of my heart. Yet, as the front door creaked open, the weight of reality hit me with the force of a punch. Mark. He wasn't meant to be back yet, not for hours, but there he stood, keys clinking as he called out to me. I pushed David aside, my hands trembling, my blouse askew, my cheeks burning with anxiety. David hurriedly snatched his jacket, mumbling about the urgency to leave, yet his eyes were wide, ensnared in the moment. I adjusted my hair, put on a smile, and entered the hall just as Mark came in, his golf bag casually draped over his shoulder. He appeared taken aback by David's presence, yet there was no hint of doubt in his expression. He patted him on the back, inquired about his well-being, unaware of my trembling hands and the way David's voice wavered in response. I remained in place, nodding with enthusiasm, laughing a bit too heartily, mentioning that David had just dropped by to borrow a book. Mark acquired it, or at least appeared to, and David departed shortly after. His farewell nonchalant, yet his gaze met mine for an instant, a caution, a vow. The door shut behind us, leaving me alone with Mark. My heart raced, the lingering touch of David's hand still haunting me. Mark remained oblivious to everything around him. He spoke of his game and the weather while I nodded, my thoughts in turmoil. The living room resembled a scene of chaos, each corner bearing the evidence of our actions. I lingered in anticipation, hoping he would inquire about my flushed cheeks, about the creases in my blouse, yet he remained silent. He pressed his lips to my cheek and mentioned he was heading to take a shower. The remainder of the day passed in a haze. I tidied up the house, polished the counter, as if I could wipe away the past. Yet it resided within me, that hidden truth, swelling like a tempest on the horizon. David's face lingered in my mind, the intensity of his gaze, and the yearning I felt for something deeper. I considered reaching out to him, conveying that we needed to end things, yet my fingers remained frozen in place. Because a part of me, the part one feared to confront, didn't want to cease. I yearned to ignite that passion once more, even if it required putting everything on the line. A couple of days passed and I encountered him once more. Mark had extended an invitation for a barbecue, relaxed, as if everything remained the same. Yet all had changed. David stood in our backyard, flipping burgers and sharing laughter with Mark, yet each glance he cast my way ignited a spark, a vivid reminder of our shared past. I donned jeans and a loose shirt, far from that dress, yet it was of no consequence. His gaze locked onto mine, and I experienced it once more, that magnetic draw, that sense of peril. He swept by me in the kitchen later, his hand lightly brushing against my back, and I stood still, my breath hitching in my throat. Unseen by all, it lingered, a hidden rhythm connecting us, poised to overflow at any moment. That night, once everyone had departed, I found myself lying awake beside Mark, his snores a constant rhythm, completely unaware. The sound of my phone vibrating on the nightstand sent a jolt through me, freezing my heart in place. It was David. We must have a conversation. Tomorrow. I gazed at the screen, my thumb poised above the reply button. I understood the essence of conversation. I understood the stakes involved. As I lay there, the recollection of his hands, his voice, his eyes pierced through me, and I responded with, "Okay." That single word felt like a capitulation, a movement toward an unknown that I couldn't govern. As I placed the phone down, the gravity of my actions, of what lay ahead, descended upon me, profound and unavoidable. Rest eluded me after I hit send on that message. The word "okay" seared into my consciousness, a solitary syllable that resembled a key twisting in a lock I could never unlock again. As I lay beside Mark, his snores a constant backdrop, I couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider within myself. The secret David and I held was no longer merely a fleeting moment. It had transformed into a burden, a lingering shadow that trailed behind me at all times. At 46, I believed I had a grasp on my boundaries, my thresholds. Yet here I was, teetering on the brink of an unknown that threatened to dismantle all I had constructed. And yet, as frightened as I felt, there was a part of me, a daring, insatiable part that yearned to jump. The following day, I found myself in complete disarray. I charred the toast, let coffee cascade over the counter, and snapped at Mark when he inquired about my mood. He gazed at me, a hint of confusion in his eyes, yet he refrained from pressing further, simply placing a gentle kiss on my forehead before heading off to work. I despised the simplicity of deceiving him, how my smile seemed like a facade I had mastered. As soon as David's message arrived, "Meet me at the park 2 p.m. A knot formed in my stomach, yet my hands instinctively reached for my keys. I convinced myself that I would bring it to a close, to express to him that we couldn't continue, that it was far too perilous, far too misguided. As I slipped into a simple sweater and jeans, my heart raced, not out of fear, but with an exhilarating sense of vitality. The park lay in serene stillness, with only a handful of joggers and dog walkers meandering beneath the overcast sky. David sat on the bench, his jacket casually draped over one shoulder, his gaze locking onto me the moment I emerged from the car. He remained expressionless, offering no wave, just observing me as I approached, and once more, I experienced that magnetic draw, that warmth that shrank the universe around us. I settled into my seat, maintaining a distance, my hands tightly clasped to prevent them from trembling. I began to voice my concerns, to insist that we needed to halt, but he interrupted me, his tone hushed and pressing. He mentioned that he couldn't shake thoughts of me, of our shared experiences, and of the close call we had. His words served as a reflection of my own thoughts, and I despised how deeply I craved to hear them. He leaned in, his hand hovering over the bench, mere inches from mine, and the atmosphere buzzed with tension, reminiscent of the moments shared in the kitchen and the living room. I shared with him the story of Mark, detailing the near miss we had with being discovered, and the overwhelming guilt that was consuming me from within. Yet, as the words escaped my lips, my body was revealing my true feelings, inclining toward him, my voice a whisper when it should have been firm. He stood his ground. He suggested we tread lightly, that our secret could remain just ours, that we could nurture this connection between us without sacrificing everything else. It was a deception, a captivating, perilous deception, and I yearned to embrace it. I'm uncertain about who made the initial move. Perhaps it was my fault, perhaps it was his, but in an instant, his hand found its way to my cheek, his thumb gliding over my skin, and I was utterly captivated. The park dissolved, the trees, the faint buzz of traffic, the universe, until it was merely us, suspended in a moment that seemed destined to blaze eternally. His lips met mine, gentle at first, then fervent, and I responded, my hands gripping his jacket, my heart racing with a blend of trepidation and longing. It was daring, exposed for all to witness, yet that only heightened the intensity, making it feel more authentic. I experienced a resurgence of vitality, a sense of desire, reminiscent of the woman I had long overlooked within myself. Yet, some secrets refused to remain concealed, especially when they loomed so large. A voice echoed my name, piercing, recognizable, and I halted, retreating, my veins chilling to frost. It was Sarah, a companion from our literary gatherings, strolling with her dog, her eyes sparkling as she absorbed the unfolding scene. David stood, retreating slightly, his expression composed, yet the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. I stumbled over my words, my voice pitched higher than usual, hands trembling as I adjusted my sweater. Sarah's smile was strained, her eyes darting between us, and I sensed she had witnessed more than she should have. She mentioned she would reach out later, her voice courteous yet laden, and turned away, leaving me with a profound sense that a change was imminent. After she departed, there was a silence between David and me. He mentioned he would call, yet his voice carried a weight, and I merely nodded, my thoughts swirling uncontrollably. I drove home, fingers tightly wrapped around the wheel, my mind circling back to Sarah's face, the way her gaze had held me. Was she aware? Would she confide in Mark? Would she share this with anyone? The revelation hung in the air, delicate and vulnerable, and I sensed myself sinking beneath its weight. Upon arriving home, I found myself in the shower, allowing the water to burn my skin, desperately attempting to cleanse the lingering memory of David's kiss and the anxiety of being exposed. However, it was unsuccessful. It resided within me, an intrinsic part of my being, and I was at a loss for how to bring it to an end. That evening, Mark returned home later than usual, weary yet in high spirits, sharing details about a project at work. I nodded and smiled, yet each word seemed to betray the truth. I lingered in anticipation, hoping for my phone to vibrate, for Sarah to reach out, for the reality to unfold. The stillness was more unsettling, akin to a tempest brewing in the distance. I considered revealing my truth, sharing it all with Mark, yet the mere idea caused a tightness in my chest. What's the best way to confess to your husband that you shared a kiss with his best friend? How do you articulate a betrayal that feels utterly incomprehensible? I was unable to accomplish it. Not at this moment. The following day, I encountered David once more. He arrived at the house unexpectedly, his complexion wan, his gaze shadowed by an unreadable emotion. Mark was at work, and the house felt eerily silent, saturated with echoes of the past. David mentioned that we had to have a serious conversation, a deep discussion about our actions and their significance. I opened the door, my heart racing, aware that this was the pivotal moment. Either we would conclude it or allow it to engulf us. He lingered in proximity, his hands fidgeting as if yearning to grasp me, yet hesitating to make the move. He mentioned that Sarah had reached out to him, posed some inquiries, and suggested that she might have witnessed something. My stomach plummeted. She hadn't shared it with Mark, not just yet, but she was on the brink, teetering on the edge. I expressed to him that we needed to put an end to it, that it was finished, that we were on the brink of ruining everything, our families, our lives. My voice trembled, tears stinging my eyes, yet David remained still. He moved in, his fingers brushing against my arm, and declared that he was indifferent. He claimed he would abandon it all, his existence, his companions, Mark, if it meant being with me. His words crashed over me like a tidal wave, surreal, unbelievable. Shall we make a mark? Walk away from my marriage, my home, for someone I hardly know beyond these fleeting encounters? It was chaos, yet as I gazed at him, the man who had admired me in that dress and desired me, I sensed that attraction once more, that intense spark. Uncertainty looms over what might have transpired had the phone not interrupted the silence. Mark's cheerful voice filled the air as he announced he'd be home early and inquired if I wanted takeout. I stood motionless, David's hand resting on my arm, the gravity of his words lingering in the air around us. I whispered a few words to Mark, ended the call, and turned my gaze toward David. His gaze was filled with desperation, silently urging me to select him, to select our bond. Yet, I found myself unable to do so. I took a step back, my voice trembling as I urged him to go, declaring that this was the end. He nodded, as if it were anticipated, yet the expression in his eyes revealed a determination to persist. The door clicked shut, and I collapsed onto the floor, enveloped by the suffocating silence. The following day, I discarded that sundress, crammed it into a garbage bag, and drove it to a dumpster on the other side of town. It was as if I was severing a part of my very being, yet it was necessary. I found myself striving to return to the woman I once was, the one who never crossed boundaries with her husband's friend, who never jeopardized everything for a fleeting moment of passion. Yet, with each passing day, the secret lingered on. It expanded, simmering, anticipating. Sarah never reached out, yet I spotted her at the grocery store, her smile too knowing, her eyes too sharp. Mark sensed my distance, inquired about my well-being, and I deceived him, claiming I was merely fatigued. Yet, each night, I found myself wide awake, pondering whether David would reach out, if Sarah would engage in conversation, and if my decision had been the correct one. I'm uncertain about what unfolds next. Perhaps Sarah will confide in Mark, leading to the downfall of my marriage. Perhaps David will return and I might lack the resolve to refuse. Perhaps I will hold onto this secret for eternity, a hidden scar that remains unseen. Yet, I am certain of one thing. That woman in the kitchen, the one who thrived under David's touch, she remains within me. And I'm uncertain if I can ever return to the act of pretending she isn't.